Justin Trudeau has bought into practically the entire UN Agenda 2030 for redistribution of wealth from the global north to the global south, and for population from the global south to the global north. He signed the UN Global Compact on Migration without any consultation with the Canadian people in the Parliament, with a bundle of falsehood that this agreement was non-binding. We now know from the European Union that it is very much binding on all member states of the UN who have signed the compact. The direction in which Justin Trudeau is headed is clear. He's out to turn Canada into a laboratory of the globalist vision. He has no mandate for such policy that will invariably change Canada radically into becoming a country with no core identity, its sovereignty and sovereign decision-making diminished as Canada is made to follow the UN directives, irrespective of whether these are contrary to Canadian interests. And since Canadian interest for Justin Trudeau is subordinate to the interests of the United Nations and the globalist agenda of a borderless world, it follows he does not speak for Canada. Well then, who speaks for Canada? In 1979, Pierre Trudeau posed this question for his opponent, Joe Clark, the leader of the Progressive Conservatives and at the time Prime Minister of Canada. In other words, for whom did the Prime Minister in Ottawa speak for and whose interests the Prime Minister defended? Did he speak for the provinces and represented the provincial interests and provincially limited vision for Canada, or for the whole of Canada? Joe Clark had famously formulated his brand of politics or vision for Canadian federalism as that of community of communities, in which the provincial governments would play a larger role and more expansive role with the federal government in sharing powers. Pierre Trudeau's description of Joe Clark's brand of politics for Canada was the blistering put-down of Ottawa, reduced to the role of a head-waiter for the provinces. 40 years later, ironically, the question that Pierre Trudeau posed for the Joe Clark government and Joe Clark is even more relevant for his son Justin Trudeau as the Prime Minister. Who speaks for Canada? Justin Trudeau, in his first formal interview given to the New York Times on winning the October 2015 election, proudly, even boastfully, declared, "There is no core identity, no mainstream in Canada. These make us the first post-national state." For Justin Trudeau, Canada with no core identity is, poof, in one stroke, a dismissal of Canada's illustrious history as one of the oldest democracies in the world after Britain and the United States. In the period since modern Canada was founded in 1867, France, for instance, since 1789, has gone through revolutions and counter-revolution, and present-day France is the Fifth Republic. How has Canada survived, developed, and grown over the past 150 years to become one of the most envied countries in the world, built on the union of two founding nations, English and French, matters little to Justin Trudeau as he announces that Canada is a post-national state. Then who speaks for Canada? And who or what does Justin Trudeau speaks for and represents? Or, in Pierre Trudeau's formulation, who is Justin Trudeau serving as the head waiter? Well, it is increasingly clear by his action that Justin Trudeau is happily aligned with the views of Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, and Emmanuel Macron, the French President, and other European leaders who are proponents of the idea of post-national states in a one borderless world that we presumably are heading towards. This is the globalist vision for the 21st century. Angela Merkel has stated emphatically that the idea of nation-state is obsolete. That nation-states must give up their sovereignty in Europe to the European Union and elsewhere to the United Nations and other international agencies. Merkel's statement was made as a rebuke to those in her own party and in her own country who are opposed to the UN agenda or plans on migration, borders, security on the basis of national interest and on the grounds of nationalism. For Merkel, patriotism is okay, but nationalism is treason. Well, Justin Trudeau's first act on becoming Prime Minister was to head to Paris with his retinue of followers to sign and celebrate the Paris Accord on climate change. He has doubled down on pushing the UN agenda on climate change, despite its negative effects on the Canadian economy and the working people on fixed income as a result of carbon tax that will drive prices on necessities upward. Further evidence of Justin Trudeau's preoccupation with globalism and virtue signaling is to smear his opponents as alt-rights, white nationalists, as Islamophobe, as homophobe, as anti-women, anti-immigrant, when on any serious examination of issues from climate change and migration to appeasement of Islamists by Canadians who disagree with him on his politics and his ideology, and he has no answer that can be defended on merits, he does what any demagogue does by smearing his opponents. In Justin Trudeau's Canada, a former terrorist, Omar Khadr, raised by a family of Al-Qaeda operatives, is awarded $10 million and who is now a free individual and an entrepreneur and landlord of a plaza in Alberta. In Justin Trudeau's Canada, ISIS terrorists are welcomed back to Canada without any indictment of treason or making war against their own country, or without any indictment on crimes against humanity. In Justin Trudeau's Canada, Muslim Brotherhood supporters and agents are courted and coddled, and the Liberal Party proudly pushes the Brotherhood agenda with Motion M103, calling any legitimate discussion on Islam and Muslims, particularly Islam weaponized by the Brotherhood, as Islamophobia. Who does Justin Trudeau speaks for? For Canadians who are nationalists and patriotic, and it is entirely idiotic and false to suggest that nationalism and patriotism do not and cannot go together, or they are opposed to each other, as in Angela Merkel's view. It is imperative for the safety and well-being of Canada that Canadians from coast to coast to coast come together to defeat Justin Trudeau and elect Andrew Scheer as Canada's 24th Prime Minister, to speak proudly and without any apology for Canada at home and abroad.